Look, I'm a descendant of individuals that were in the civil rights movement. My uncle was Jefferson Thomas, one of Little Rock Nine, when nine kids integrated Central High School in 1957. And he was trying to get into high school and he was refused access to an all-white high school. And I used to listen to those stories about how our people were denied an education. And when you're young, they were just stories. When I got to college, it became more real to me when I saw him in my history books when I was in college. I would see his picture and I realized this is a real thing. And I would tell my professors and they would say, oh no, you're just making it up. I go, no, no, that's really my relative. And it really stuck with me for quite a long time. This process that we're going through right now, just then how it became real to me when I got older, the whole thing of chattel slavery and slavery, the fact that African Americans were property. Now it just kind of rolls off your tongue, but we were treated like animals. We were treated like livestock, and whether you were married or not didn't matter. They could buy and sell you. They could sell, trade, or treat slaves as really pieces of property. And the children of the slaves often were retained as the property of the master and the slave owners. That whole process, if you think about it, how one human being treated another human being, this process of reparations, hearing those stories, as an African-American male, yes, it struck me, but for the first time, it really struck inside me, into my soul. And I can almost feel my ancestors and what they went through, and being brought here from Africa to be in bondage and in the Middle Passage. For the first time, listening to all these stories as we started doing our piecing together the damage that slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination with housing and property and everything, how that impacted us over the centuries. And all of a sudden it said, okay, I now know what we kind of need to do. But the thing that probably impacted me the most is my colleagues or people who actually listen in on listen to us and listen to those stories, to have them come back and say, you know, I used to say to myself, that's not something I did. I'm a white male, white female. I didn't participate in that. And yes, maybe my ancestors did and did it. I don't know, but I now know I have benefited from it. And I've benefited from it in ways that I never thought about, or even the fact that this country was based on free labor. And if we were to quantify that, the trillions of dollars that this country didn't have to pay to be able to build this great country into what it is today, I think a lot of people now who say, I don't want to get into critical race theory, I don't want to learn about that, I don't want to make my kids feel guilty. They're now saying, I now want my kids to know. Not because I want them to feel guilty, because I want them to know so they don't repeat what my ancestors did before. And for me, when I hear that, that just kind of sends chills up my spine, because it says, you now get it. You now understand why this task force is so important and why we're spending so much time kind of recounting all of the abuses that have gone on for centuries and centuries, and where we are now, and what do we need to do to correct that. The way California goes is the way the country goes. I firmly believe that. That's why I love this state. We start things that other people either are afraid to do or are unwilling to do. And by connecting the dots and showing just the reality of what this great injustice has done to a race of people, we get so far removed from the historical aspects of what had happened that we're like, look, today, we don't treat African Americans as slaves. But when you look at the prison system, you go, oh, I now can connect the dots that the prison industrial system might just be another form of slavery, or that the 13th Amendment put a clause in there where it said that, yes, African Americans are free, except in quotations, if you are involved in some kind of criminal activity, we can then revert to treating you like a property into slavery. And so as we start looking at different aspects of what's happening now, criminal justice system, how people are being treated, the wealth gap between African Americans and people with money is so huge that it was intentional, it was deliberate, and it was done in a way to make sure that African Americans would always remain in a subservient position and would never be able to catch up and be equal financially, education-wise, and that the system itself is an indictment. And I think that's what fears a lot of people have, because they're afraid that this indictment of the American system that we built, that we love, and democracy is great. But the great thing about democracy, you can also make changes. You can also reflect on yourselves and then say, hey, let's change these things. And we've done that. And we need to do that more and more. And that's what this report will say. It's like, look at let's connect the dots, why things are bad right now, why things are not so good for African Americans right now. We can trace it. And then you can get to the root of the problem. When you hear Clyburn talk about crime and punishment, or even with law enforcement, whether or not they're treating African Americans right or not, he's saying, let's quit looking at the bad apples. Let's get to the root of the problem, the root of the tree. This report is talking about, let's get to the root of the problem of racism. Let's get to the root of the problem of criminal justice, the root of the problem of discrimination, the root of the problem of not being able to educate our young African American and men and women. Let's get to the root of those problems and then create a tree that's stronger and better, so that we then produce the kind of fruit that we want, that will make the society much better, but most important, right the wrong and build a better society. But most important, we grow a better tree, a tree that is more equitable for everybody. As a legislator, as someone, as this moves forward next year, when we have to actually go back to our colleagues and convince them that whatever recommendations we come up with for how to resolve reparations, the first step is we got to make sure they understand why this is so important. The worst thing that could happen is we get there and they go, why are we doing this? I mean, it's very clear to you. It's very clear to me. It's probably very clear to a lot of Californians, but there are some that really don't understand why we're even going through this process. And if we can make sure that our colleagues who may have a different understanding of racism, critical race theory, affirmative action, we still have those individuals that think a different way. And if we can convince them that the reason we have to do this is because the measures we've already put in place were not enough. We've got to go another step further. And yes, it might be financial, it might be legislative, it might be a budget remedy, it might be the way we bring people into the education system, but we've got to prove to them. Step one is so vital and important. I would ask the public not only to look at this, but to look at this report, but start coming to the task force and the committee, as committee members, even members of the legislature, make recommendations. Some of the best ideas come from people not in public office. I can guarantee you that. It comes from everyday people who might say, have you ever tried this to reverse discrimination? Have you ever tried this to close the wage gap? Have you ever tried this to help with the criminal justice system? And that might be the best solution. So I'm hoping that people get activated and get involved in this process, and more people come to us with solutions on how we can rectify this great injustice that's been going on for 4 centuries.